Hey everyone, how you going? Welcome to another video. I'm going to be talking about space and discussing it, and you probably soon quickly see that it's space, time, and matter are really hard to separate, but still gonna separate them and try to talk about space individually, what it is, and just a few ideas of not just my ideas, other people's ideas. See what modern science says about it, and um, yeah, get into it. So, some claims from modern science today, and these are all simultaneously supposedly true and deductible, even if they are conflicting. So, you'll soon see what I mean when I rattle off, go through a few of them. The first is the universe is three-dimensional. The universe is four-dimensional, three for space, one for time. The universe has 9 or 10 or 11 dimensions. That's a bit of a trip. Matter curves space-time, which I think they mean mass curves space-time, or matter, which has the property of mass, has the effect of gravity, which curves this whole thing that they've connected. The next one, the universe is flat, and that's a bit different to what it might seem like. You might have a vision of a flat piece of paper. You'd be kind of correct, but we're going to try to clear that one up as well. The universe is infinite. Infinity in itself is a subject worth thinking about on its own, but yeah, we'll talk about that. The universe is 84 billion light years wide, even though I don't have it written down, but I think it's like estimated at 13 billion years old, according to their Big Bang theory. But so we'll discuss how that can be possible. If it's 13 billion years old, how can it be 84 billion years wide? The universe is a bubble or an onion, which contradicts the one that says the universe is flat. Or a hall of mirrors shaped like a soccer ball. We'll discuss what they mean by that. Or a shape out of Dante's Divine Comedy, and I'm not sure if that's an actual thing or if it was just on that website that I got this off, but I done some research into that because I've never heard of it, and that was a trip in itself. So the first claim that the universe is three-dimensional, well, that's pretty obvious from what we've learned in school and how we view space on a fundamental level, like with the three dimensions. So we're talking about Euclidean and Cartesian space. So who was Euclid? Most files about Euclid were lost, so most of his life was unknown. He was most famous for being an ancient Greek mathematician, considered the father of geometry. Many people developed some of the theories that he presented in his text. However, what is most important to remember is that he was the first person to write a complete, coherent review of all the geometrical theory that as he understood it. His textbook, The Elements, is one of the most widely published books in the world. Euclid attended Plato's Academy in Athens for his mathematical training from students of Plato. After his training, he went back to Alexandria in Egypt. Alexandria was the largest city on the western side of the world. Euclid also funded schools and taught students while he was in Alexandria. Euclid gathered his work from previous mathematicians and created his pile of work, which was eventually put into his textbook. His textbook is one of the most affecting work in the history of mathematics. So he basically, the crude illustration that I've drawn on the screen, he did geometrical works within this Euclidean, the 3 Euclidean planes, like we would have a x, the x plane or line, y, z, however you. So you got your 3 dimensions. That's pretty standard and simple. And then along come Rene Descartes in. I don't have too much written down on him, and I can't really remember, but one of his most enduring legacies was the development of the Cartesian or analytic geometry, which uses algebra to describe geometry. So he took this Cartesian concept of the 3 dimensions, and he put the lines on it and made the distinction and the deduction, the denotation of spatial points on that plane as symbols, and he's responsible for a whole heap of stuff to do with mathematics, but I don't get right into mathematics, so I can't tell you too much about him. But he's not also all about mathematics. He was the one who was famous for the quote, "I think, therefore I am." So, like, yeah, Cartesian doubt. He basically he questioned all his beliefs, or he doubted all his beliefs. So yeah, you have a belief and you say, well, why is that true? And then you go back to the reason why that's true, and then you ask why that is true, and then you keep going back and back and back. And the only thing that he concluded was that he could think, and therefore he existed. So yeah, he was also come up with the concept of the evil genius, which is another like philosophical thought to do with Cartesian doubt. And it was funny reading this because I thought this in primary school, like there's no way anyone could prove to me that this world didn't just come into existence 1 second ago, and all my memories were implanted into me, and it's all just like an illusion, kind of as if we're in a simulation and somebody just switched it on 5 seconds ago, and we've got memories of history and all the rest of it. There's no way to prove that that's not the case. So yeah, the big thinkers, Rene Descartes. The next one, the universe is 4-dimensional, 3 for space, 1 for time. That's in my opinion a delusion, and the delusional treatment of the future and the past as existing dimensions. So what it actually is just one object that's constantly moving. And I didn't want to talk about matter and stuff like that, and motion and all of that shit. I just really wanted to talk about space, but just want to rebut this statement of the universe is 4-dimensional, 3 for space and 1 for time. Yeah, don't have too much more to say than that. Like, the past is just a memory, it doesn't exist, and the future isn't here yet. All you have is the now, so the time is only linear, and time is only a concept too. But the next point they make is the universe has 9 or 10 or 11 dimensions. This one is going to take a little bit more probably than just words to explain. Try and so if you just remember what I just erased, that little drawing. How am I going to do this? Alright, I'm going to have to switch to this. Okay, so it starts off from a point representing 0. This is the 0th dimension, or the and I'm going to have to draw this really small too. So start off with a point here. and this is like drawing the Cartesian plane. Will start in the first dimension. So from the first dimension, you have a line representing length. It's supposed to be going through the point. You're supposed to be drawing this way small too. So the length, and then the next dimension, the breadth, the next dimension, the height. Now this is all theoretical mathematics too. This is why I don't agree with a lot of it. So when they say like the universe is 4-dimensional, 3 for space, 1 for time, you could imagine if I represented all of this space as an infinite point of the now, what they have done is created the exact same concept for the future. So here's like 3-dimensional space, but another representation of it, say like a timeline. So we're stuck in it here now. Back at this first one that I drew, it went on back before that, but then we can connect a line to the two, and that's the 4th dimension. So the 5th dimension would be a time travel to a point in the time dimension. So any point along here, we can just zoom in. So this is why it's bullshit. You start to see it's like fairy tales, man. And this is if I'm explaining it right. Like if I'm not, fucking somebody tell me, because this is the only reason, the way that I can understand what they're fucking talking about. So 5th dimension is time travel to a point in the time dimension, and the 6th dimension is time travel to a parallel universe that you can conceptualize and influence. Infinite lines from a 5th dimensional point. So this whole thing here would become one point, I'm guessing, and say we can create another infinite timeline in one that doesn't exist in our own. So you could call it like a parallel universe or something like that. And it'd be like a line connected to there. So then you've got your next dimension, you know what I mean? The 7th dimension is the infinite possibility of every potential state or line on the 6th dimension treated as a point. So if you could have all of these connections to this timeline and to parallel universes, and then there'd be infinite of them as well, then you take the whole thing and you treat this as one point. And then you've entered the 7th dimension, the infinite possibility of a potential state or line on the 6th dimension. The 8th dimension is an entirely different 7th dimensional universe. So you've got this big jumble mumble over here now, and then you create another big jumble mumble over here. Fucking, that's your 7th. That's another 7th dimension separate to your own. And then you connect the two, and then you're in your 8th. So your 8th dimension is entirely different to your 7th dimensional universe, represented as a point with a different starting condition than our own, meaning like the laws of physics in this universe are different than our own. So the 8th dimension is a line drawn between the 7th and the 8th. So talking about other universes, now separate universes. This is where you get your bubble foam theory and all shit like that. The 9th dimension is the folding of this whole structure to allow the connections of the points between the 7th and the 8th dimension. So travel from one infinite universe from any point in time to the other. Yeah, it's crazy. The 10th dimension is the treatment of every infinite line emanating and connecting each infinite dimension as one point. So if this was the 8th dimension here. It represented as that line, and I folded the line in on itself so that I could access, so that any point in the line, it looks something like that. That's the 9th dimension, and then the 10th dimension is treating this whole thing as one point, not even a dimension. So like, get that up here for modern day physics. Like, we're trying to fucking understand the world clearer, and we end up with shit like that. Like, come on, man. Need to start looking inside ourselves too before figuring out who we are as beings before we start conceptualizing 10th dimensions, man. Alright, that's my point of view on that. The next statement they make: matter curves space-time. So again, this is a constant use of the inaccurate analogy between gravity and the fabric of space-time, or the fact that they're connected, which I explained earlier. I hope I did a good job of it. And I haven't really covered time yet, because I haven't covered matter, and I didn't really want to even start talking about space-time because it's an illusion. It's a concept, and I think it's a wrong one. And it's just due to the rate that you receive information based on distance from the person who transmitted the information. It doesn't mean that space and time are one thing that warp. It's like the rate of induction of light through a medium, but it's just through empty space. There's easier ways to describe it and comprehend it than blowing it out of proportion. Just because gravity affects light and mass and matter, like mass objects pull towards each other, there's different ways to think about it, and yeah, we're going to go through some of them eventually. Yeah, it's actually gravitational force having an effect on matter and light, which are both electromagnetic expressions. So make that clearer on later on too. The universe is flat. Yeah, okay. According to general relativity and the linear motion linear motion relative to other moving observational entities in space. So you get two entities and they're moving in space. How they move is apparently how they determine whether space is curved or not. Or it's more like if you draw a triangle between 3 points in space, the angles, if it's flat space, the angles allowed up to 180 degrees. See, and I'm not an expert in none of this or the mathematics. I'm just trying to explain some of their reasoning too. Yeah, so if it's curved, if space is curved like the Earth is, then if you draw a triangle on 3 points, then the lines will bulge out, and the angles of the triangle won't add up to 180. They'll be obtuse, and the universe would be what they call three-spherical in shape, and that's a mathematical term. I haven't fully grasped the concept yet. It's got to do with a heap of two spheres stacked. It's pretty tech. I can't explain that. And then you've got like negative curvature would be hyperbolic space, so it curves inwards. So if it was on like a saddle or something like that, saddle shaped, then the lines on the triangle would curve inwards. Probably getting a bit too far into it. That's basically how they determine that the universe is flat. We can draw a triangle between the stars and the angles of fucking, as far as I can tell, angles add up to 180 degrees. The universe is infinite. Galaxies extend as far as we can detect with no sign of diminishing. There is no evidence that the universe has an edge. The part of the universe we can observe from Earth is filled more or less uniformly with galaxies extending in every direction as far as we can see. More than 10 billion light years, or about 6 billion trillion miles. We know the galaxies must extend further than we can see, but we do not know whether the universe is infinite or not. When astronomers sometimes refer carelessly to galaxies near the edge of the universe, they are referring only to the edge of the observable universe, which we'll probably have to cover now. With this one, the universe is 84 billion light years wide. So like their theory of the Big Bang happened 13 billion years ago, I think. Shit. I don't know the number. I don't really believe in the theory that basically it's expanded, right? We're not nowhere near the edge. We're somewhere in the middle at this point in time, and as it's expanded, it's somehow broken the speed limit of light, which is possible because it's not a thing. So anyways, so the light coming off the edge of the explosion, it's like an expanding loaf of bread, and you can imagine if the light beam's on the edge of the bread and it's traveling in towards the center, but the bread's expanding, well, it just takes longer to travel. And that's basically, in a nutshell, why they think the universe is 84 billion light years wide. The universe is a bubble or an onion. I think what they were talking about here was the space-time foam explanation for dark energy. Basically says that in the space in between conventional matter is occupied by bubbles that work like dark matter. They keep the classical matter and energy in the universe from becoming ubiquitous, at least theoretically. And yeah, this is another thing. Dark matter is all speculation, and that's basically dark matter is what they come up with to explain the expansion of the universe. Observable expansion, I should say. What's astonishing that is that according to the research, these bubbles have their own continuum. They're self-contained universes. Time doesn't have to work the same way inside these bubbles because for the purposes of this theory and due to a concept called entropy, the arrow of time isn't necessary to explain the quantum world. Yeah, quantum world, man, that's a bit weird. Let me get into that. Next point. Oh, I didn't really refute that at all. I'm not gonna either because it's just a whack statement in the first place. Yeah, don't know because I'm not even gonna go down there. Or a hall of mirrors shaped like a soccer ball. So talking about cosmic topology. There are, which is topology is like it'd be what the universe is shaped like as a whole, outside of the observable universe and everything. There are three possibilities for the curvature of the universe. Space can be flat, spherical, or hyperbolic. The geometry of the universe depends on its curvature and also its topology, which governs the way space is connected, and so determines if it is finite or infinite. Measurements of the cosmic rate. See, I'm going to stop there with going on about this shit because it's all going against the point what I wanted to make in the first place, which is that space isn't anything. It's a complete avoidance of everything. So just had to stop there, going through them notes. Or a shape out of Dante's Divine Comedy, which I found was weird. I didn't know too much about Dante's Divine Comedy. I I wrote a bit down. I ended up listening to the end chapter. It's fairly heavy stuff to try and keep. It's really poetic, and that basically Dante's conception of the universe is largely Ptolemaic, which they believe the Earth is at the center of the universe, and most of Paradiso, which is the chapter I listened to, the audiobook of, is spent traveling outward through the larger and larger spheres encircling the Earth. And I found it weird that they'd even mention something like this in their description of what the universe might be like. I think what they meant was because he's traveling through these spheres and basically from hell at the center of the Earth, he travels through each layer till he gets to Jerusalem or wherever, and then that's where where you can get through to the other side, to the God. And then when he enters that sphere, there's a whole other set of spheres inside, and so that his conception was kind of like Gnostic in a way, where there was this three-dimensional, spherical, repeating substance of ether or something like that, but within each sphere rotated faster or slower depending on their distance from God, and at each end was an extreme polarity between the darkness and the light, and it's just incredible. I think it more aligns with my sort of way of viewing with it than anything, and I was confused as to why. Yeah. I wrote a few texts. I got a few texts off of the thing that when she who makes my mind in paradise has told me of the truth that goes against the present life of miserable mortals, as someone who can notice in a mirror a candle's flame when it is lit behind him before he has a sight or thought of it, and turns around to see if what the mirror tells him is true, and sees that it agrees with it, as notes are sung to music's measure. Even so I acted, as well I remember, while gazing into the bright eyes of beauty, with which love wove the cord to capture me. And that's probably him looking out towards the substance, but then when he looks into it, when he goes through the Empyrean, that's the sphere that's in between Earth and God, he sees a sequence of concentric spheres centered around an impossibly bright and dense point of light, expanding to meet him at the edge of the Primum Mobile, which the Primum Mobile is the prime mover, essentially the end pole of God and light. I saw a point that radiated light so sharply that the eyelids which it flared on must close because of its intensity. Whatever star looked smallest from the earth would more look like a moon if placed beside it, as a star is set next to another star. Perhaps as close a halo seems to circle the starlight radiance that paints it there around the thickest mist surrounding it. As close a ring of fire spun about the point so fast that it would have outstripped the motion orbiting the world most swiftly, and this sphere was encircled by another, that by a third, and the third by a fourth, the fourth by a fifth, then the fifth by a sixth. The seventh followed, by now spread so wide that the whole arc of Juno's messenger would be too narrow to encompass it. So too the eighth and ninth, and each of them revolved more slowly in proportion to the number of turns distant from the center. Yeah, so that's it's a real poetical and metaphysical sort of literature, I thought, and the first two chapters must be about his descent from Earth down into the hell, and then the second chapter, I'm guessing, would be the travel out from hell. back to Earth. I'm not too sure, but yeah, it's interesting. So I've refuted the Big Bang a lot. So I'll just start talking about a little bit about that. So, did the universe expand from a point? If so, doesn't the universe have to have an edge? And they say no, the Big Bang was not an explosion in space. It was a process that involved all of space. This misconception causes more confusion than any other in cosmology. Unfortunately, many students, teachers, and scientists mistakenly picture the Big Bang as an explosion that took place at some location in space, hurtling matter outward. In reality, all of space was filled with energy right from the beginning. There was no center to the expansion, and no magical point from which matter hurtled outward. The confusion arises in part because of the amazing conclusion that the observable portion of the universe was once packed into a incredibly tiny volume. Alright, I can stop there. So yeah, I kind of agree with the fact that, or rather, I get that's a good way or a similar way as to how I'm gonna start explaining it in the future, because in future videos, because what space is, in my opinion at the moment, is the birth of magnetism. Not to say that magnetism is space, but it's kind of like, you have one thing before magnetism, the ether, but the ether isn't space either. Space is the resultant effect of the ether collapsing in on itself and producing magnetism, which is where all the... I don't want to make too many vague statements. But yeah, I'll try and express that later on in the videos as I get there. Taoism on space: 30 spokes converge upon a single hub. It is on the hole in the center that use. Start that again. 30 spokes converge upon a single hub. It is on the hole in the center that the use of the cart hinges. We make a vessel from a lump of clay. It is the empty space within the vessel that makes it useful. We make doors and windows for a room, but it is these empty spaces that make the room livable. Thus, while the tangible has its advantages, it is the intangible that makes it useful. I think that's a beautiful little saying. Basically, what I believe is, like, space has no properties. These guys talk about space bending and twisting, and according to what mass is in the space. What they're actually just talking about is observations and how they move according to the field that's attracting them. Space is, like everything, an illusion and a concept, even though we can't see it. It's kind of funny. But how we describe these things bases our understanding on the world, and if we keep thinking of the world and the universe like little tiny balls, then we're not gonna grow anywhere, because the universe isn't made out of tiny balls and or atoms. But I didn't want to start talking about that either, because this is supposed to be space. Space is the lack of these little balls. It's the lack of everything. It's really quite simple. It's the same way that is similar to a hole or a shadow. Like, the hole isn't anything. When you measure the hole, you're not actually measuring the hole, you're measuring the distance between the dirt. You might think it's the same thing, but the hole is really just an absence of the dirt, same as the shadow is an absence of the light. It's not an actual physical thing in itself. And that's really what I believe, and I think people should start thinking a bit more like that, especially in the scientific community, and we need to sort of drop the whole space-time thing. Don't know, doesn't make sense, especially when it extrapolates into fucking 10 dimensions. No. No way, no thanks, man. Anyway, it's probably gone long enough, and cheers for listening, guys. I'll try and put some definitions up, because some of the shit can get quite fucking mind-boggling, some of the words. And yeah. Sick. Peace. I'll see you later.